The time has finally come. Hello there, writerly friend, and welcome back to Max Answers Writing Advice Questions! With a catch. NaNoWriMo is almost upon us, National Novel Writing Month. It's almost here, and you've sent your writing questions, you wanted answers, and I've answered as many as I could up until this point. And now the time has finally arrived. The promise will be fulfilled. Max's Writing Advice Answerathon is finally here. Though you already knew that because you clicked on this video. So, it's about time to begin. You may be thinking to yourselves, Max, this video doesn't look as long as you claimed it would be. Well, it is because there's a little bit of a catch. As always, allow me to explain to you how this video is going to go. I have a pile, an enormous pile of writing questions. I have a random number generator to help me decide which questions I will answer. And I'm going to have a timer. Except this time, I'm going to use the magic of editing to give myself a little bit of time to think my answer, so I don't have to ramble my way through things. I may actually be able to answer questions within the 3 minutes that I've allocated for each question, so. And if Max from the future is to be trusted, there should also be like actual pictures for the questions this time around, so you don't have to try to understand me, try to speak as fast as possible. This is going to be a much more methodical video, kind of like my planning guide and my pep talks, where I actually mildly sound like I know what I'm talking about. Silliness out of the way. I want to give you, as always, the formal disclaimer and remind you that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as the ramblings of a silly person who looks a little bit, or rather, precisely, like this. And by the way, there's one last thing I want to say before I actually dive right into the, first answer block of questions. I want to let you know that, feel free to still leave writing questions. I'm going to keep answering them through November and beyond, probably in a really similar format, just 3 to 4 questions per video. I'll still be doing that, so, don't feel bad if your question doesn't get picked. I don't think I can get through all of these questions in one video. That's probably humanly impossible without making like a 5-hour video. But, if you still have questions, send them my way. No biggie, okay? With that being said, let's dive right in. And so, first question today. Max, I have my story planned out, but I fear the climax comes too fast. Is there anything you suggest for fixing this? Alright, time on! As with many other problems in life, I want you to stop for a minute and ask yourself, why do I feel like this, and where does this feeling come from? And I'm gonna remind you once again really quickly that usually when it comes to writing, you're so close to the story, like you're like this close to the writing and to the process of thinking about this story, that you begin to overthink things and you begin to judge your own stuff before things happen. As always, my first and primary advice for this is write the story, complete the story, and once it's completed, once you've had time, revise it, share it with somebody and see what they think. Because more often than not, you'll find that you pretty much nailed things the first time around, and if you didn't, you can still fix it later. If you want a concrete answer to your question, how can you go about fixing this? Write the story and worry about it later. This is one of those things where, like, if you are worrying about this at the planning phase, because you didn't mention if you had the story written or not, or if you had began writing it, you said that you had it planned out, but that's kind of like what gets me a little bit. It's kind of like, you haven't written the story, you haven't even gotten started, and in my experience, my stories always change from the planning process, so, you may not even have the climax you're thinking you may have. So, I think that for now, the best course of action would be to just dive in, get writing, and see where the story goes. And once it is complete, stand back for a little while, read it again, and if you're still uncertain whether that climax is good or not, share it with a friend and see what they think. And now, for the next question. Can you give us a few tips on the self-publishing that you do? Time, start! For those of you who don't know, I am an independent author, or self-publishing, either word is fine. I create my own content, I hire my own editor, and I hire my own cover artist. And for people out there looking into self-publishing, I have 2 pieces of advice. The first one, if you're looking for a value, is quality. The second one is exposure. And I know that I can make a totally really big video on self-publishing, but for now, my 2 pieces of advice are this. Please, for the love of all things holy and sacred, do not put your book through an ebook generator program thing. Program your own ebook, because it is the only way you can guarantee that it will look good on any device. And you may be asking yourselves, Max, how do I program an ebook? there's a really good guide by a man named Guido Henkel. Guidohenkel. Guido Henkel. He has a really good guide online called Taking Pride in eBook Formatting. Or, even better, if you'd like to support this awesome guy who taught thousands of people how to code ebooks, he has a book called The Zen of eBook Formatting. I own that book as well. Really good. It's kind of like an expanded version of his original talk. It's an 11-part, web series, I guess. It's written, not actually like video format, where he explains how to code an ebook. From the programs to the actual coding, it's not complicated. I can't code, and I learned how to code ebooks and to create the best ebook possible. And the presentation of your ebook is really, really meaningful because self-publishing gets a lot of flack for being haphazardly made, and there are a lot of haphazardly made stuff. For instance, people who create ebooks by just tossing them through Scrivener. I hate to take that pot shot, but I used to make them like that, and those ebooks are not good looking. They're not good looking at all, and you have no control over the end product and how they're gonna look on different devices. That's why I recommend making your own ebooks. It's not that hard, I can assure you. And once you make a template, you don't have to worry about them anymore because you have the template for how to code these books. Now, 50 seconds left. Exposure. The recipe for success is this: make stuff, show the world, make more stuff. That's pretty much what it is. And that boils down to a lot of talking online, a lot of posting online, and creating a presence online. Because you need to have an audience to sell your books to. Simple as that. And does that take a long time? It does. It absolutely takes a long time, but it's one of those things where it's like, the best time to start was yesterday, so get started today. Share your stuff online. And you may be thinking to yourselves, Max, but I don't want to share my books for free. Well, then find something else to share. Share your opinion, share your thoughts, share your voice, and create a gathering through that. Ultimately, creating your fan base boils down to sharing something about you and continuing to share that. And through that exposure, you will be able to, wow, I actually went long, create that fan base to support your books. Simple as that. Create good quality stuff, share it with the world, let them know, and keep making stuff. This next question is actually a really, really fun one that details a tool that I created a long time ago that I haven't had a chance to talk about. And the question goes a little bit like this. My story is going to be a longer series with probably 8 or more books. I have so much content and detail because my story is very close to my heart. What would your suggestion be for keeping track of all the information and making it flow properly? Time on. There's a little tool that I have, and I like to call it the Almanac. Here's what you do, okay? Open up a fresh, new document, whether it is on Evernote, like I do, or on Word, or a notebook, whatever it is. Some sort of format for capturing information, okay? I want you, and this is going to take a while, but it's better to get it done as soon as possible, and it's better to get it done as soon as possible, as you get books done. That's what I do. This here is part of my revision process, and you'll learn why it's actually really cool. It's called the Almanac, or you can call it the Bible if you care. Read the book, and every time you introduce a concept or an idea, write it down and describe what it is, and define its rules. Simple as that. You go through the book, and by the way, as you go through the book and you add more details, keep adding those to that. So the entire point is to create an almanac full of information, basically almost like a design document, letting you know what you have said in the past and the open loops that you have left open, I guess, and the loose ends that you left loose, and the possibilities of what things could be, such as also writing down questions and such, kind of like making the Bible for your story. This is really important because, especially for big stories or stories with a really large scope, you end up having a lot of things. Like, hey, that thing that you mentioned like 30 chapters ago in the middle of this book, like, are you ever going to reference that again? The answer is probably always no, but you get the feeling. Stop, read through the first book that you have, or the second book, or as many as you've got, and create that almanac. Every time you introduce a character, every time you introduce a concept, an idea, a place, an object, write down what it is, and keep stacking that information as you keep going through the story. Is it time consuming? I think it is, but for big series, I think it's absolutely worth it. It keeps you from, especially if you don't have a lot of betas, it keeps you from contradicting yourself and from unknowingly retconning stuff, or contradicting something you said like 3 books ago. Again, you're probably getting started, so it's not that big of a deal. But moving forward, as you finish books, go and update that almanac. I think it really helps. For the time being, though, if you are in the act of writing this gosh doodly darn book right now, don't worry about it. Worry about this once you have finished the book. Once you have finished the book and revised it. Why? Because if you start writing things down right now and those things change, you may create a conflict. You know what I'm saying? Worry only about the almanac once you have finished the story first and foremost. Okay? This is a big question, but I'm gonna give you a really concise answer for once. What about writing characters from other backgrounds / cultures? No matter how objective I try to be or how much research I do, I still feel I might get them wrong. Okay, there's a little bit of a fallacy with writing people of other backgrounds and or races or cultures or whatever. And there is this fallacy that people are afraid of writing people of different backgrounds because they're afraid that someone's going to come out of the woodwork and tell you that you did it wrong, and that through that that makes you a bad person or something along those lines. And I kind of have to stand here as like the voice of reason and remind you, as always, that people and cultures and backgrounds are not like concepts or values or ideals. They're not nationalism, they're not communism, they're not the history of the United States of America, which is kind of factual. You know what I'm saying? Backgrounds are not factual. People are not factual. Backgrounds and cultures are made of people who share similar traits. That's it. I've said this in the past and I'm going to say it again. Reality is not objective. Reality is subjective because reality is based on your own experiences, your own lifetime, and an amalgamation of everything that has happened to you. So from that point of view, you cannot ever get the life of X right, but you can get pretty darn close. And I don't think that anyone out there is really, honestly complaining that you didn't get X and Y right, because it's almost unrealistic. It's a fallacy to demand that, somebody writes this character correctly. I come from from Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico, in a particular city in which my reality was immediately, necessarily different than the reality of other people. You know what I'm saying? I grew up in a city of millions of people with thousands of subcultures. How can you expect to get everyone within that umbrella term right? Instead, my recommendation is this, and it has always been this. Stop worrying about this. Dive in. You have done your research. You have done all the thinking that you had to do. Dive in and tell that character's story. No hesitation, no doubt, no fear. Tell that character's story. There is no way to get anything right because everything is different and it changes with the times. It's an absolute fallacy to expect X and Y to be representative of everything. And I don't think that's the goal. I think the goal is to tell stories. So dive in and start telling stories. Okay? And the next question is actually summarized because I think it was like a longer block of question or a longer block filled with a lot of personal information. So I summarized it. I hope you don't mind. I was wondering if you could help me because I can't focus on any of my stories. I write things, but then things happen and a few days later I think of another story. It makes me feel guilty to leave the first story and start on another one. What do I do? And go. I hate to plug my own stuff, but I feel that sometimes, and maybe it's different for me because I've made my own system for coming up with stories that keeps me engaged and focused. That's why when I experience situations like this, or people tell me about stuff like this, my first stuff is, what were the foundations of your story? Which leads me to my next point. For those of you who don't know, I recently re-released. I made a new version of my guide for how to plan a novel. There should be an annotation on the screen right now, as well as a link in the description below. You can go check it out. I created that planning guide to first and foremost stay engaged and excited about writing that story, because the main problem that I experienced with writing was that, especially if you're a slower writer than me, or rather, that's actually not even correct. If you're a regular writer, because I'm a really fast writer, I write books really, really, really fast. And even then, I had issues where I wouldn't be engaged enough in the story, and I would lose momentum and I would lose steam. So I created a planning guide to create the foundations of the story, grounded primarily on my excitement and the things that made me happy and the things that I looked forward to. My advice for this, because foundations really do matter, I recommend you check out that video and either A, Because here's the dealio. You can't live your entire life with guilt, okay? Yeah, it sucks you have to leave stories behind. There are always going to be more stories than time. Pick a story and write it, okay? Stop feeling guilty. Stop feeling guilty. Check out my planning guide. Plan the story. Create that really good foundation and move forward, okay? Stop living with guilt. This following question was also summarized because it had a lot of personal information. Here's something that has been bothering me for quite some time now. Most of my writing experience comes from writing smut, as well as highly emotional, dramatic moments. As someone with hopes of being published, I find it difficult to write any other types of scenarios. How do you recommend that I improve writing other various scene types? This is one of those really fun moments. Timer on! As always, maybe it's weird to think how far I've come that I have to tell people this. Question why you feel the way you feel, okay? Who told you in your life that smut and highly dramatical and highly emotional moments are any lesser than any other part of writing? I hate to, people are like, oh, smut is bad because sex is bad and many other bad things. And here's the dealio. You can have stories made of this stuff. You can have stories made of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. And disarm the opinions of anyone who tells you otherwise. There's going to be many people out there. And I swear, like 20% of the questions that I got were clearly from people who believed everything their English professors told them. The hero's journey. Oh my god. That's a video for an entire... That's a rant for an entire video altogether. It's spoilers. Boiling down art to a chemical equation is... not fun. Not fun at all. Silliness out of the way. Ask yourself, why is it that you feel that you need to improve in other writing scenes? Is it because you really want to write other stuff? Or is it because someone told you that you gotta write other stuff? Now, I don't know your life. I'm not in your head. I haven't made your choices. And I haven't experienced the same people that you have experienced. But I want to tell you this. If you want to get more experience at writing other stuff, simply go and write other stuff. It's as simple as that. Experience means absolutely nothing. Experience is simply just the time you put into doing stuff. So start putting time into doing that. Simple as that. Now, as for anything else, I want to leave this question with one last thing. If you like writing smut, if you like writing highly emotional, dramatic moments, and trust me, I do love me some highly emotional, dramatic moments. Read Raven's Gem. That's just people making this. I love characters who make bad choices. I love characters who have frowny faces and just are so bitter and so jaded. My favorite. Own it. If there's something you like to write it and own it. Okay? People naturally write and pull themselves closer to the things that attract them the most and interest them the most. So write those stuff. Does that mean I love bitter people? Bitter, jaded people? It's true. Anyhow, whatever you like to write it. Own it and just write more of that. You don't have to fit into any sort of writer category, and you can be published writing highly dramatical, emotional, smut moments. Not all three at the same time, but a combination of those. You can get published with that. And not even like 50 Shades of Grey territory. You can write real meaningful stuff with those ingredients right there. There is no recipe for being published, and there is no checklist of what you need to do to be a real author, okay? If there's something you like, if there's something that you gravitate towards, do it. Own it and just do it. Well, this question was made for me. What do I do if I think my story ideas are too silly? I sometimes think that it's not worth writing because the plotline might get a bit too strange for some people. Thanks. Timer on. 1 word. Actually, not 1 word. 3 words. Alice in Wonderland. There is nothing wrong with a story being silly. There is nothing wrong with things being over the top. There's nothing wrong with things being too sappy, too dramatical, too ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with that. As someone who really, really likes the Metal Gear franchise, I can tell you there's nothing wrong with silly. There's nothing wrong with silly. I'm a ridiculous, silly person, and I made story seeds for years, and some of them were downright ridiculous. But that's part of the fun, isn't it? I think And I totally get where you're coming from. You're afraid that someone's gonna look at it and disarm your book by saying that it's childish, dumb, schlock. They will, it's really easy for somebody to just say, oh, that's too silly, and just disarm it. But that's their problem, not yours. To me, you're asking me what I think. I don't think that every story needs to be silly ridiculous. But those that need to be silly ridiculous should be silly ridiculous. I am down for a ridiculous story with a ridiculous plot twist. I love stuff like that. Why? Because stuff like that doesn't only feel really authentic, because stories that demand that sort of feeling always feel more real than real stories, if you get what I'm saying. The thing that makes Alice in Wonderland so effective and the inspiration for countless works is that the people inside of that world don't question a single thing. That is their reality. And through the fact of their acknowledgement that that is their reality, the world feels so much more real. That's what makes it so effective. And more importantly, the power of silly stories like that is that they're weird. They're strange. They're not our reality, and they linger on in the minds of our readers. It's a sort of thing that it stays in the back of your mind once you close the book and you lay in bed, thinking about that great story that you just read, and you keep thinking to yourselves, man, that world was really fun. Or that world was downright weird. Be weird. Like with the last question, own it. If that's what the story demands of you, do it. Simple as that. You gotta write the story that demands your attention. With that dramatic answer out of the way, we have a much more practical question coming up. How long do you think a chapter should be? Or how can I know my chapter is long enough? There's a really straightforward, kind of blunt answer to this question, and I'm gonna get it out of the way real quickly. The chapter should end whenever the main subject of this chapter is completed or wrapped up, which is actually kind of an arbitrary answer, so I'm going to give you a much more fitting answer to what you're looking for, okay? Before I sit down to write a chapter, I ask myself how long I think the chapter is going to be. Because there's a meaning in length. There's a point in length, and I'm sorry, I thought of a really dirty joke, but this is neither the time nor the place for that. To me, in my mind, there's about 3 lengths for chapters. There's a chapter that is about 1,000 to 1,500 words in length. I like to call those transitions. They're just 3 pages long, really short chapters. Then there are chapters that are 3,000 words long, about 10 pages. Those are my meat and potatoes in chapters. And then you have anything longer than that. I ask myself, how long is this chapter going to be? How long are the actions within this chapter going to take to wrap up? And generally, probably 90% of the time, the chapter goes long, because you can't, things go unexpectedly. But my key, because I hate to just give you the answer of like, once things are over, finish the chapter. That's actually not as meaningful. Sit down before you write that paragraph, that chapter, and ask yourself, how long do I think this chapter is going to be? I have an idea of what's going to happen. How long will it take me to wrap that up? 1,500 words, 3,000 words, or more. I've had chapters, I think the longest chapter I ever wrote was like 5,500 words, but that's how the chapter needed to be. So, that's just life, isn't it? You can't make this into a science. It's actually the exact same reason why I have a giant, enormous problem with the idea of the hero's journey, because it tries to make writing into an equation, which is not only silly, but I think it's kind of like turning something that is magic into science. And, I know that sounds really cool and could be the impetus for an entire series of books, but writing is an act of emotion. It is an act of magic, alchemy and imagination melding together, creating a portal to a place far, far away that only you could have found. Writing is magic. Making it into science is not fun for me. That's why, for chapters, I like to ask myself, how long do you think this is going to take? And it always takes like 10% more to get there. Maybe like 20% more, but that's life, So, again, I think there's about 3 different chapter lengths. Between 1,000 and 1,500 words, a really short chapter, an intermission, if you may, a 3,000 word standard chapter, and anything more than that, up to a maximum of like 5,000 words. I know there are writers out there who have done chapters that are like 50 pages long. I don't know how they do it, but you came here looking for my opinion, and that's my opinion. And mildly connected to the previous question and kind of the slew of questions that we've had recently, the next one goes a little bit like this. What advice can you give about antagonists who are not a physical force or being, as in a person versus the self? The climax of a current work doesn't feel like a climax because there is no big baddie to take down. It doesn't feel refined enough. Oh, English teachers, how I love you, how I hate you, and how I cannot live without you. Start! I want to stand here first and foremost as a person in this world who's going to tell you that not every story needs to have a baddie. Not every story needs to have an antagonist. And you can have stories about a person just dealing with grief, a person letting go of the past, a person experiencing loss. There doesn't need to be an antagonist in the form of a person, maybe, or not even in the form of nature. It can be a story about a person against themselves, or a person against the changing times. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And before anybody goes, out and tells you that it's kind of like something that doesn't happen, that is the meat and potatoes of like slice of life stories. It's somebody just enduring the times or enduring a time of change. There is nothing strange nor silly about this or ridiculous about this. It's as normal as having a big baddie. And I'm feeling this close to ranting again about the hero's journey because it's so problematic. Because I get people asking me questions like, my story doesn't have an oracle. What should I do? Should I just add a character that fits the archetype of an oracle just for the sake of fitting in within this really, 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 really archaic way of doing things? No, that's silly. As for your particular question, I feel that if you have already finished writing the story, I am going to assume, by the way that you phrased it, and I'm looking at my second screen, that you have already written it. If you haven't, I will give you the same advice as earlier on, which is write it and then see how it goes. If you have already written it, and you feel that it doesn't feel as exciting, I don't know what you mean that it doesn't feel as defined enough, because I don't see the connection between not having an archetypical big baddie as being more defined than having a person deal with their own grief. I don't see the connection there. But if you have already written it, I would recommend you share it with someone else, and literally write a questionnaire at the end of the packet and ask them, hey, what do you think about the climax? How do you feel about the story not having an antagonist? Feedback is the best way to go about fixing something like this, although there may actually not even be a problem. There's nothing wrong with a story having no physical or force of nature antagonistical body. It's okay. A story can just be about a person overcoming grief or a person dealing with their own problems. There's nothing wrong with that. And don't let anyone else tell you otherwise, especially your English teacher. The following is a really long question. Hi there, Max. I love your videos and have found them to be very useful. However, I have noticed most of your advice is geared more towards novelists than any other type of fiction writers. I myself write mostly short stories. I am going to write my first ever novel during this year's NaNoWriMo, in fact. Good luck. I believe in you. Though the short stories I write are connected in a way similar to TV show episodes, I wanted to ask, what's your experience with short stories? Do you have any tips? Any specific tips for shorter forms of fiction? Timer, start. 2 points. Do I have experience writing shorter forms of fiction? I do. I started out writing short stories. That is, of course, I don't mean that as a way to say that short fiction is a leeway into writing bigger books. They are both equal forms of fiction, and they're both equally meaningful. And I don't want to say one is better than the other. I just enjoy writing novels better. Now, I have experience writing short stories. I wrote a bunch of them, especially in high school and in my first years in college. It's fun, and I totally get what you're doing. The idea of having these short stories be linked together, that's absolutely fun. And by the way, before anybody gives you, don't let anybody give you crap about writing short fiction, especially like even the longer short stuff like novelettes and stuff like that. That stuff is totally legit, and that is the foundation of a lot of the biggest works in writing. For instance, H.P. Lovecraft did not write anything very long. At the Mountains of Madness is a novelette, and that is probably one of the most meaningful works of fiction. So yeah, don't let anybody tell you that short fiction is not meaningful. As for particular advice, I have always been of the mind that less is better than more, especially in short fiction. And I like to be concise. If you're looking for a ballpark number, and I'm taking this straight from my favorite book on writing by Stephen King, whenever you finish the first draft, strive to cut down the word count by 10%. Being concise, especially within short fiction, coming in, to me, short fiction is a punch in the dark. You come in, or a kiss in the dark if you prefer that metaphor even better. You come in, you punch someone in the dark, and then you escape. A victimless crime. You want to come in, you want to give them something, and then get out as soon as possible. That's the way that I used to write short fiction. Give them an image, give them a moment, a little taste, and then you get out. So it lingers in their minds, so it leaves them questions, and so it stays with them. That's the way that I used to do short fiction. Is it hard to, cut down your story by 10%? It is, but again, I feel that less is always more, especially in that particular format. And being concise, trust me, I ramble a lot. Being concise is way, way, way more effective. And this is another question that is basically aimed at me. How do you recommend going about writing genderqueer characters, like in terms of pronouns and any other grammatical stuff? I've tried using pronouns like am, but a lot of people find them difficult to read. Well, that's their problem. Then you got the usual, they, them is plural. That's wrong. They and them is a singular pronoun. Even though it's also singular. Yeah! We're same channel. So I was curious on what you had to say. Thank you if you get this message. You're welcome. So, I've got two pieces of advice on this. First and foremost, I've tackled this in two different ways. And really quickly, before I talk about that, pronouns. I think the singular they, them is absolutely perfect, and there's basically, I like it, it works, and it's only a matter of time before everyone completely gets it and understands it, so I see no problem with it at all. I have been known to use the zer and se and zer, Z-E-R. I used that in a science fiction setting because it felt more science fiction-y and it actually really worked. Now, within my main piece of advice, either contextualize, because sometimes you have to explain why somebody's being referred to as that particular pronoun. That's only going to change in a matter of time, but until then, if you have to explain, I say come in, have a paragraph, really quick, don't make it a soapbox, just come in, explain, and never, ever, ever talk about it ever again. Treat it as a normal thing, which leads to my other point, just start using it and never, ever explain it. Treat it as a normal thing. For the science fiction-y story, I referred to a character by Zer the entire time, and soon enough, the audience, or my beta readers, understood that that's what that character was referred to, and we moved on from there. Simple as that. And is there enough time for me to rant? There is 1 minute and 38 seconds for me to rant. Perfect. I take issue when people complain about the use of different pronouns and the use of things that are not particularly normal or foreseen as normal at this very point in time in the year 2015. Though, of course, the things change with the times. My thing is this. I have issues with people who easily relate to fantastical characters and creatures, but apparently suddenly lose the ability to relate to people who exist within their very own reality. Kinda like, oh dude, I love Bilbo Baggins, but I can't relate to a character who is gay, or a character who is non-binary. I just don't have the ability to relate to them. I always see that as a little bit suspicious. Not particularly throwing stones at anybody out there, but whenever I see stuff like that, it always seems very, very, very suspicious, and ultimately, I don't worry about it. I'm out there to tell a story, and if one of my characters, like in the past, happens to be non-binary or genderqueer, I just come in, explain it, or don't explain it, and we move on. It's normal, there's nothing wrong with it, and simple as that. Oh man, I've been waiting for this question for 59 years. How does one go about writing a good death scene without seeming too cheesy? No matter what I do, it always ends up sounding like it was cut from a soap opera. Oh man, only Mexican kids are gonna get that joke. Anyhow, timer on. Man, if you've been following me on my blog for ages, maxkirin.tumblr.com, you remember that silly post I did like years ago about the difference between writing a death scene in your head and actually on paper. Of course, that post is actually really silly, and I did it mostly out of humor, not actually as a feeling of that's what writing is. Here is the dealio, and I kind of have to come out here and say this right now. I prefer, honestly, if you're asking me, would I rather have a death scene that is too dramatic as one that is not dramatic? I would take the dramatic one every time. I think if there is a time to be dramatic, it is during character deaths. And here's the deal, and I've said this before, and this is really, really loose. This is directly connected to my rant about cliches and why you shouldn't take them seriously. And it's this. If you squint your eyes hard enough, anything can look like it came from a soap opera. If you look at something without context, if you look at something without the emotional attachment that you should have by this point in the story, anything can look like soap opera. Pick the most dramatic movie you know. Pick the saddest ending to any movie you know. The one that comes to mind is the saddest moment in the movie Forrest Gump. That one always jumps to mind. If you don't have the point of reference for that, if you don't have the emotional attachment, it looks downright stupid, right? It looks silly and ridiculous. Without context, without the emotional attachment, anything can look like it's out of a soap opera. Again, if you squint your eyes hard enough, anything will look like anything else. My thing is this. If there's a time to be dramatic, if there's a time to show emotion and feeling, it is during death. Or a character doesn't show it and another emotion rises forward. Or maybe it is the lack of emotions that make the story so hard-hitting. I don't think there is, just like there's no one way to write X type of person or Y type of background. That was more like a V, but forget about that. There is no one way of writing a particular type of scene. You have to write the scene that happens in that particular story. And as always, as I've said, whenever you have to write stuff like this, literally turn off all of those brain receptors in your head that worry about what people are going to think and what people are going to say, and write the story truthfully, without fear and without hesitation. Why? Because that story chose you, and you have to write it the way it comes to you. People are always like, the writer is the director of the book, and I don't think so. I'm the camera person. I'm just there recording. All of my books are basically found footage from the point of view of a camera person. You know, this is what happened. I don't claim ownership of this stuff. I just record it as it came to me. Write it. The only way it's going to feel real and authentic... That scared me. The only way to write it, to make it feel real and authentic, is to write it like it comes to you. Write it without fear, without doubt, and without hesitation. Okay? My shirt keeps getting a little bit too The next question is not anywhere near as silly as that last joke I just made. The question goes a little bit like this. Hey Max, how would you deal with controversial issues in your book, such as dictatorships? I don't want to be censored. Capital D P. Not capital D. Whoops. Timer on. Remember a few episodes ago when I was talking about how in life we have baggage and every person has a different definition to what words mean because words are mildly subjective. Words may have a definition, but they mean different things to different people. Now, when you ask me, Max, how would you go about dealing with controversial issues? Like dictatorships, I'm sitting here like, there is nothing controversial about that. They exist, they've been documented for centuries. And unless you live in a country where there is a dictatorship, that I don't think you're gonna have issues being censored. But then again, I don't know your background, I don't know where you are. That being said, this is really connected to another question or set of questions that I have that deal with sensitive issues. You know, how do you write them without getting in trouble or without, asking to be censored? Which, by the way, the only way you can be censored is either A, if your publisher doesn't like it, they'll probably just ask you to change it, or really, like, if they don't like what you have, you won't get to the publishing point of being censored, they just won't publish your book. People worry about a lot of things that are not actually problems. Like as I mentioned, words mean different things to different people. I don't think dictatorships are specifically controversial, and I don't think that you would get censored for writing about them, especially because they're a real world thing. And unless you're talking about a real person and a real dictatorship, and if it's a fictional one, you should be clear, it should be fine. But that's more an issue of writing about real world people as opposed to controversial issues. My thing is this: if you are not, as I said with writing sensitive issues earlier, as long as you're not glorifying it, and what I mean by that, because nobody ever talks about the definition of glorifying, if you're not putting it up to celestial heights, is like, hey, look how awesome this is, look how awesome it is to have depression, look how awesome it is to do self-harm, look how awesome it is to be in a dictatorship. If you're not doing that, you're fine. And additionally, if as long as you don't do it for shock value, I think you should be fine. But like I said, generally, most usually, if there is something in your book that a publisher wouldn't like to have, you wouldn't get to the point of them asking you to censor it. They just wouldn't publish your book. But even then, as I've said a million times in the past, by the virtue that you are self-conscious about this and that you're asking yourself these questions, it is most likely that you have nothing to worry about. I can't make promises though, because I'm not in your head and I'm not reading your book. But again, you kind of have to play it by ear. Maybe ask someone else for feedback and see what they think. Alright, we've been having too much fun with silly questions. It's time to get real. I stopped writing for about 1.5 years because it was no longer fun and exciting. I miss it and I want to start again, but I can't get excited. I can't think of characters that I like or ideas that sound fun. Any advice? I hate to be real. I hate to be real. By the way, I'm actually a figment of your imagination. You're looking at a blank screen. Wake up, kitty, you're still in the plane. Timer, start. People forget that the human mind is an ecosystem, and that there are thousands of moving pieces that affect the entirety of your system as a machine, as an ecosystem, as a collection of pieces and bits that work together in tantrum. People forget that. And I always get, and I'm just gonna take a leap of faith. Whenever people send me messages like that, and I always feel, whether it's about art, whether it's about writing, whether it's about anything, I always feel that the subject becomes almost a scapegoat. Because here's the dealio. I honestly don't feel like writing is the problem in situations like this. Because writing is a bit of an escape. And, to say, like, I can't make the escape fun, then you're not looking for the escape. You know what I'm saying? I hate to just kind of, become a Sigmund Freud and just, make this all about you and your mom, but wow, is that inappropriate? I don't think it's inappropriate, but anyhow, I'm a silly dork. Is there anything in your life that emerged at the point when writing stopped being fun? Because remember, you are a collection of bits and pieces working in tantrum, and if one of those pieces is not exactly, well, okay, I'm not making this about mental health. I'm making this about your relationships and your family and your work and your friends and your relationships all around. This is not about mental health. Sorry if I made it seem like that. Is there something that you're worrying about? Are you not happy with your job? Are you not happy at school? Is there something that you're worried about, like the SATs or whatever, any other random thing in your life? Because that's what I felt like. When writing was not fun for me, it wasn't because the writing wasn't actually fun. It was because there was something else in my mind that was bothering me. And it was work junk, it was friendship junk. Note, friendship with quotation marks. Love life drama, all of those things that were just kind of like bearing down on you, ignoring you from the writing. And whenever you want to sit down to write, you're just thinking about those things. And writing can't seem fun because all you can think of are those things. Now, this, and I hate to be like that, is because you're probably looking to writing as an escape, but right now it doesn't seem fun because you should probably deal with those things. Is it tough to make those choices? It absolutely is. It is one of the hardest things, but you gotta deal with those things eventually. Take that test, take that driving test, talk to that friend who you haven't talked to in a long time, finally end that relationship, if you don't like that job, talk to your manager, get something worked out, or just quit and get another job. Because those problems are not going to go away, and writing is not going to be fun until you get rid of that piece in your ecosystem that is ruining the entire mechanical setup. At least that's what I think from my experience. As for anything else, if that's not your problem, and I'm totally, and and I totally got it wrong, which is entirely likely. I don't claim to be absolute. I just, this is my opinion. This is my personal experience. When I read that question, that's what I thought of. If you still can't find a way to, if that's not your problem, check out my planning guide. It's built entirely, not starting with one particular thing, but creating a foundation of things that seem exciting and fun, and creating something from there on. Again, if it's not a real life thing that's getting in the way of writing, I recommend, check out my planning guide, link in the description below, and, get back into writing. If it's something you can't do anything about, then it's beyond your control, I can think of the death of a loved one, the loss of someone you cared about, the loss of material stuffs, the change in the times, the fear of the unknown. You have no control over those things. You can prepare for them, but if you want to write, just take something, hold on to it, own it, and just start writing, okay? Man, I'm almost out of coffee. Next question. What's your advice for writing multiple stories set in a shared universe that run concurrently to each other? This is a quick one. Timer, start. If you're writing about a world and you're working with other people, note that I'm saying if you have direct lines of communication with these people, as opposed to writing fan fiction. Communication! With any sort of collaborative work, communication is key. Sit down and talk to them. Hey, what are you doing with this world? Hey, this is what I'm doing. Does it conflict with you? Let's work together. Hey, wouldn't it be fun if this thing and this thing happened? Let's make it work. Let's talk. People are terrified of talking to other people, but talking is the only way you're gonna get stuff done. I hate to be like that, and if that sounds like I'm being disrespectful, I'm not trying to be like that. But seriously, communication is the key. If you're working in a world with other people, you have to talk about what your plan is. And it's hilarious because I come from a background. My favorite show growing up was The Simpsons during the 90s, by the way, just to clarify what run I'm talking about. And my Plague and I would watch the DVDs with the commentary on. That commentary was the best thing ever. And the writers for that show would talk about how they would just meet up one weekend at a hotel and just sit down and brainstorm what each was going to do for their episodes and work things together. And just sitting down, talking, you write the episodes and then you meet back again. It's like, hey, here's what I thought. Okay, that's good. You know what? Let's change that. And let's actually make these two connect. Communication is key. I just want to come out and say that's why that run of The Simpsons was the best thing ever, because there was so good collaboration. That and Conan O'Brien writing, but that's par for the course. Again, communication is key when writing collaborative works, so talk. Hey, this next question is aimed at me. What sort of reaction would you have if a piece indicated time skips mid-chapter using an epistolary format, in this case, an interlude with dated logs from the characters' POVs that indicate that time has indeed progressed? That is totally aimed at me. I recently did a video on what I thought about chapters, and generally, here's my dealio. I don't like time skips within a chapter because it's very, very easy to throw off the reader, because the chapter sets you in a time and place, and to have a jump that throws you years, or let's say just days ahead, feels kind of off. My stance in that has always been just make it a new chapter. What's meaningful about the time skip that it can't just be another chapter? You know what I'm saying? Because does that just become a problem of I don't want to have this chapter be 1,000 words? Because I don't know. I've always preferred that nice solid format. And it tells the reader, new chapter, something has changed, and it's definitely ahead in the timeline. Now, that being said, the only reason why I believe that is because, again, you want the story to be clear and concise so the reader is never confused. Confusing the reader is one of the easiest things to do in writing, so you want to make sure that you don't confuse them. Now, within this particular concept, the way that you have phrased this, I have to say that it would make sense, primarily because you have dated logs from a character's POV, and it indicates that time has passed. The stubborn part of me is still wondering why can't it just be a chapter of its own? But that solves the problem. The problem is, how do we make sure the reader is not confused when we jump ahead, 10 years in time within the same chapter? I think that solves the problem. It's very clear, it's concise, it gives the reader the information, and it lets them know what they need to know. I think it works. Next question is a little bit silly. It's an art-related question. How would you make fantasy world maps for your stories? And this question is actually really straightforward. My answer is that I generally don't do maps for my stories. I've made maps personally for myself, but not maps for the actual book. I'm planning on doing something like that in the future once I, find someone who can do that nice map-like style. But I have made stuff like that. I found a bunch of tutorials. I can't think of one right off the top of my head, though I'm sure, just Google, how to make a fantasy map on GIMP or Photoshop. There's a lot of really good stuff out there, a lot of really good resources, and I like to keep those for my personal use, mostly, and I'm going to be honest with you, I do that mostly because if I'm in the middle of writing, and just like with anything else in writing, the world is going to change as I write it, I don't want to make a picture and post it and let all of my followers know that, hey, this city is located here. And then in the middle of writing, realize that city is not even important or not even a part of the plot. And I don't want to put myself out there in a situation where I have to, attest to the impression I've made in other people's minds. I make them for my personal use. I don't share them. But in the past, I've used tutorials that I picked up on GIMP. It's not that complicated. And there's also websites that can make a fantasy world for you. There's a lot of resources out there. But that's what I think. Following up on the list of really practical questions, here comes another one. Am I too close to the camera? I think I'm too close to the camera. How did you find time to write while in college? That is a really good question, to which I have a really, really quick answer. I should have gotten more coffee during my break. Let's start. I found time to write in college through two things. First and foremost, I was taking creative writing courses, so that's one way to find writing time. You kind of have to do it for the course. So that's kind of a non-answer. So instead, I'm going to give you the answer that I have for how to write when you have a 60-hour work week. I was working during my darkest time. I was working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And when you work that much, and we're talking about not like I spend 10 hours out of the house. No, that's 10 hours of work with a couple hours to spend there for commute. So get up at 5 in the morning, get home at 5 in the afternoon. Half of the day gone with work. When you work that much, your home feels less like a home and it feels more like a hotel because you're going back to the hotel room to shower, sleep, and then get back to work. That's what it feels like. And during those dark times, I had to make tough choices, and it's one of those, I hate to just say it like this, but it's really what it feels like. You have to make sacrifices. When I worked that crazy schedule, I would have about 2 hours for myself at the end of every day. I would have 2 hours for myself, and I'd spend 1 hour working out and the other hour writing. Simple as that. I stopped playing video games, as much, and I stopped watching as many videos online. I didn't watch TV by then, so it was a matter of making sacrifices. As for the other stuff, what I did at work, I took every chance I had to write, and I wrote. I wrote during my breaks, and I wrote during my lunch. There was a nice attic at the warehouse that I worked at, or / laboratory, and I would just run up to not really run up because that's against the rules. No running! I would run up the hall. I would run up to the attic, and there was an ancient desk there, and I cleaned it up, and I got a half-broken chair, and I would just put out my I used to write with a really tiny keyboard and my phone. Not this phone, because that's not... I had a 4S back then, but a keyboard and my phone, and I would just type on Evernote or a Notepad or whatever app that I used back then. I would get an hour of writing. I wrote during my 2 15-minute breaks and during my lunch, so that's about an hour of extra writing that I got, making it 2 hours of writing every night. Was it a lot? Not really. I write way more now, but I'm doing it for a living now. But back then I had to get everything that I wanted. It's really easy to feel discouraged when you have a crazy schedule or when you're going to college. But the only way to move forward is to make sacrifices. I used to worry about what people would think of me. And it's people thought that I was crazy running up to the attic every lunch, and just wolfing down my lunch so I could get to writing. But, I had to get writing. It was what I wanted to do, and it was the only way to move forward, so I made sacrifices. I stopped playing as many games, I stopped watching as many videos, and I just got to writing. I hate to say it like that, because I'm sure that, your time is already, taken up with a part-time job, and God knows how many units you're taking, and you can't find the time, but you gotta make sacrifices somewhere. You know, it's terrible, I know, but it's the only way you're gonna move forward, you know? You gotta make the time, make sacrifices, and get writing, okay? It's hard, I know, but I know that you can do it, and you can find your own way to make things work, okay? Now, I know this video has gone on a little bit long, but let's do like a few more questions. I think 21 was gonna be the magic number. So my question is, how do you write unpredictable characters? I have a few characters, think Alice in Wonderland, that I plan to have jumping from acting mad to acting wise and full of knowledge, and I'm not sure how to balance that. And start. I'm going to change this question really quickly because it's really easy to focus on semantics, so I'm going to make it about something else, okay? How do you write X type of character? Because writing an unpredictable character, because here's the deal, you're asking me how do I write an unpredictable character who can be this or this at any time, but I don't know how to balance that. I mean, part of being unpredictable is that you can't balance that, but let me just make it very quickly. How do you write X type of character? How do you write a dramatic hero? How do you write a sorrowful character? How do you write a cheery-go-lucky character? Here's what you do. When the time comes to write that character, just write it. Write it however it comes to you, however it appears to you within the vision that is writing, and without doubt, without fear, without hesitation. That's it. Simple as that. Here's the thing about writing, is that people think that writing, thanks to English teachers out there, I don't hate all English teachers, just some of the things they teach, and they try to make writing equations and they try to make it science because it's the only way to quantify, right? The only way to make you understand how a story works is by making it an equation or a hero's journey. My God. Oh my God. I need more coffee if I want to get through all these hero's journey ranting. But characters are not that. Characters are people. And right now you think this character is unpredictable and this character can be these two things, but there is no way to know until you actually write that character. Maybe there are both things, or maybe there are a little bit more of one than the other. It's not a balancing act. This is not about balancing those two elements. It is about writing that character how it comes to you, how they appear to you, and however they may behave within the world that you're creating. It's okay. As I've said this entire video, own it, claim it, and just write it without questioning yourself, without hesitation, doubt, and any of those bad things that I've been talking about forever. Just write it. And once you've finished the story and you've given it some time and you're revising it, if you feel that maybe you need to do a little bit of fine-tuning, it's okay. Right now, on the act of planning, on the act of beginning to write, don't question it. Just dive in and get writing. Okay? And the second to last question, this also has been summarized because it had a lot of personal information, and it goes a little bit like this. Do I have to start a new novel for National Novel Writing Month? I don't want to let go of the story that I'm writing, and I feel that if I start a new one, I will never get to finish the one that I have. By the way, I ran out of coffee, so I just got some more water. It's almost as good. Timer, start! Just because it's called National Novel Writing Month, it doesn't mean you have to write a novel, or start a new novel, or do a long piece of writing. You could do short stories, you can do anything you want. You can even do nonfiction, it's fine. It's a matter of just writing. National Novel Writing Month is ultimately about writing. Nothing else, nothing more. And I think you know very well the feeling that I've been trying to encapsulate with these answers. If you don't want to start a new novel, don't start a new novel. Keep working on the one you're working on. There is no NaNoWriMo police, and no one's gonna come knocking on your door. Seriously, no one's gonna come knocking on your door and demanding that you do X or Y for your project for National Novel Writing Month. Just do whatever you want to do. And it's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. People worry a lot about rules, and there are hardly any rules for writing. There are only recommendations, and even then, those are really loose. As I've been saying, this entire video has been me and my writing advice. And if you don't want to start a new novel, don't start a new novel. If you want to write short stories, write short stories. If you want to do novelettes, if you want to, just write a memoir, it's okay. Write whatever you want to write. There's nothing wrong with that. NaNoWriMo is about writing, ultimately, and finally. And by the way, props to you for understanding the main concept that I've been trying to get across. And that is that if you don't finish stories, you're not gonna move forward. And yeah, there will always be a shiny new story out there in the corner of your vision, tantalizing you, giving you all that temptation to go and write it. But you have this story, and you should finish it, because it's the only way you're gonna move forward with, writing. Can you believe 21 questions? That's like 7 videos. Crazy. This question goes a little bit like this. How do you know you're taking too long on writing a book? I've been serious about writing this book for almost 2 years now, and it's getting there. But I feel like I'm taking too long. I am giving myself some leeway as it's my first book, but I just feel like maybe I should be farther along. What was the first question we answered today? You know what? This is a nice way to wrap up the circle. Much like the first question I answered today, actually, I should turn on the timer. Wow, such professionalism. Who told you you were taking too long? Where did you get that impression? I want to formally remind you that every writer is different, and every writer writes at different speeds. It's simple as that. Especially who are you comparing yourself to? Are you comparing yourself to writers in a similar situation to you, or are you comparing yourself to writers that are doing this full time, who don't have limitations such as college or, having a day job and stuff like that? Whenever I post my word counts on Twitter, I always like to preface them, and I'm going to be doing vlogs again, by the way, and I'm going to be showing my stats again, but I want to, again, take those with a grain of salt, because I do this for a living, I have the time to be doing this, and I show those mostly out of a desire to show by example that you can do these things, but not exactly as a way to, taunt you or tell you this is the standard. It's not. I write tons. I write faster than most people I know, but that's because that's the sort of writer I am. I am a distance runner, not a marathon runner. I do a lot of writing in short bursts as opposed to over really, really long periods of time. And I'm not saying you have to be one or the other. You are your very own different writer, and there is nothing wrong with taking the time to get the story done. And first and foremost, this is your first book, and it takes a while to get over that, process. I mean, my first book took me a long time to complete, and that's okay. You have to get used to the process, and you have to dive in and see how things go. It's okay. These feelings that you have right now are not there because it's wrong to take a long time. I mean, there's like 20 writers that I want to drop in here, but it feels unwise to do so. There are a lot of writers out there who take a long time getting books out. And fans complain, sure, but doesn't mean that's part of the process, Like, what are your options here? Like, stop writing the book? Write faster? I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do to get the book out there. What I want you to get out of this is that you're your own writer, and throughout writing, you're gonna get people telling you their point of view. And I hate to say it like this, but if they're not like me, they're gonna tell you rules and facts and solid rules as opposed to giving you their opinion, which is what they're doing. Writing is about points of view. And this channel is about sharing my point of view. Simple as that. Nothing else, nothing more. And I don't want you to take anything that I'm saying and anything that I do as gospel. You're your own writer. You deserve the right to find your own way to do things. And, maybe you're a writer who takes a while to get books out. There's nothing wrong with that, Everyone finds their own way to do things. Maybe in time, you'll get into the groove of things and develop a faster writing style. Or maybe you'll be like this. It's okay. There is no rights or wrongs in writing. And ultimately, as long as you're writing and as long as you're creating stories and sharing them with the world, you're doing the right thing. There's nothing for you to worry about. Just keep writing, And one last thing. Life can be really complicated, but focus on you, focus on the fun. It's not a race. Writing is not a race. Writing is not, a competition. It's not about who gets there and gets the most books out. A is A to L, P. No, it's about writing and having fun and sharing stories. Okay? Okay. And that's about it for today's video. My God, it's gonna take a while to edit this one. I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. I hope you enjoyed this Answerathon, and I can assure you, there will be more Answerathons in the near future. I want to, first and foremost, give me your feedback. What do you think about this video? What do you think of the editing and the way that I did the video and I formatted it? I think that it was more concise than my previous videos, and I tackled 21 questions, which is like 7 videos worth. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that, if anything, I gave you another point of view. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want more. Again, thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll be seeing you on the next one.